Hello and welcome to the very first episode of And Just Like That, We Found Therapy. I am such a big fan of podcasts. I listen to Almost Adulting, Call Her Daddy, Where Do We Begin, Everything Iconic all the time. So this is my very humble contribution to this universe. Whether you want to watch the episodes before listening to the show, I will leave that up to you. I know the show by heart, so I know I wouldn't need to, but then again, that is completely up to you. Please don't forget to rate me 5 stars, share with your friends, and leave me any good feedback as lovingly as you can of anything you think I should be doing that I'm not doing already. Love you, enjoy! All right, so Vana, thank you so much for coming on board and being my first guest on this adventure. So for this first episode, I have a very special guest on. She's one of my very close friends, Vana. Vana is a serial entrepreneur that I actually met in investment banking in London over 10 years ago. She was assigned my buddy, and bless her, she has not stopped looking after me ever since. Since then, Vana has been on the Apprentice UK. She's had several companies herself, including a dating app. And now she's an elite matchmaker, also dating coach, both paid and underpaid if you're her close friend from 2011. But Vana, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited and I can't wait to see what this podcast has to hold for our future.
Yes.
It's going to be amazing.
Anything else you want to add to this intro?
I don't think so. I think you got it.
Right.
I'm a New York City girl here to talk to you about dating.
Well, you come from the right place. So let's dive into it. So I give you some homework. You, more than anyone, know the premise of my podcast. So we're going to talk about the first episode of one of my favorite shows, Sex and the City. You know, in this episode, they start with this third party person that actually moves to London into New York, meets this guy in a very romantic way. She thinks they're going to get married, and then he ghosts her before ghosting is a thing, which I think is hilarious. And that's how we get introduced. Romance has died in Manhattan. I don't think it's kind of revived since. Let us know it's different. But I think the whole episode, other than meeting the girls, we get introduced with 2 concepts. We can date 2 ways, according to Charlotte, which is following the playbook of not putting out, waiting for the guy to call, and, sort of playing these games that are hard to get tight. Or the Samantha way, which Carrie tries on for the episode with an ex of hers, which is have sex like a man, no strings attached, go with the flow. And I think throughout the episode, they keep asking, is this true? Do men like their women unavailable? What do you think of this? What are your initial thoughts? Do you think it's possible to be like a man if you're a cisgender heterosexual woman?
Basically, what we're talking about is these sort of 2 extremes on the spectrum of dating approaches, right? We're talking about the extreme of Charlotte, which is let's call it the Charlotte method, which is all about playing hard to get. And it's all about high standards and boundaries, and then really ensuring that mutual respect, right? And that seriousness. And it's creating space for the guy to prove himself. So you're basically leaning back, the Charlotte leans back and she's like, okay, you want me? Come get me. Right. And then there's the Samantha, which is obviously a very different approach. And it's much more liberated and free. And it's all around focusing on the physical relationships and not getting emotionally attached. So my question is there something in between? Does it have to be either or? Because I actually don't think it does. In my experience, it depends on what you're looking for, right? If you're looking for a long-term relationship, the Charlotte method is going to be the better approach. If we're going to do completely binary.
One or the other,
yeah. It's either A or B. We're going to do the Charlotte approach if we're looking for relationships. But I think our dating world has gotten so much more nuanced. Women have had to start dating in a way that feels more like a Samantha because of the dating apps, right? Because there are so many options out there. And because dating moves so fast these days, as a protection mechanism, I think women have started to date more like Samantha. So to summarize, if you're looking for emotional intimacy and a long-term commitment, I think the Charlotte approach is better and it creates that foundation. But if you're dating more to explore your own sexuality and to discover your own independence, then I think like the Samantha freedom path is like the way to go. It's just about how much you can handle when it comes to emotional fulfillment. Is the only way for your emotional fulfillment to be met to date like Charlotte and to get a long-term relationship? Or are you the type of girl who date many guys at once and get your emotional fulfillment in small little doses?
Okay, so now I have a follow-up questions because you know that I've done my fair share of listening to podcasts about dating. And I have heard repeatedly that the science, the chemicals, the hormones that happen before and
Yes.
after you have sex are completely different as a man and a woman, which comes to me like, of course, a woman can say, you know what, I'm going to be my best Samantha self and I'm going to have sex, no strings attached. And like, as you said, it depends on how well you can navigate those emotions. But the fact of the matter is, and I'm not a scientist, but apparently it is scientifically proven that a man will cling onto a woman like leading up to sex. And then after sex, he's kind of like relaxed and he kind of detaches, and a woman is different. She's kind of like detached, and then they have sex, and then she releases this hormone thing that will cause for her to get attached.
Okay. So that little hormone thing we're talking about is called oxytocin, and you're not wrong. So I also am not a trained scientist, but in my experience, I have noticed that women do bond more with men after sex. So I think this is a really fascinating question, right? Because there are biological and psychological differences in how men and women date, right? And in how men and women approach sex. So for women, as you said, like the oxytocin, the bonding hormone increases after they have sex. So that makes emotional detachment like really hard for some women. But I also want to mention that I know a lot of women and have a lot of clients that can do this because all women are different. There is not just a one size fits all. So I know many women who can follow that Samantha model of more casual sex and not have emotional attachment. So if you have experienced this sort of attachment after sex, then of course you should be a little more careful because you know that that's the way your body responds. But it is possible to do the Samantha way. I've seen it firsthand.
Okay, well, we'll leave that then up to our listeners. But then let's dip our toes a bit more into the stages of dating, because my problem with the Charlotte method, which I think is naturally the one that I tend to incline towards, is like, I'm a strong, independent woman. I know what I want. Why should I lean back and wait for this guy to ask me out? I know I like him. I'm going to ask him out. And I think there is a difficulty navigating, like, how much do I want to be just the one that is like reactive? You guys come up to me and like, we'll see. Cause then I feel like you might end up with the bottom of the litter or the last pick of the litter. And I'm a control freak. So I feel like I lose control with that. Or, like sometimes they do say in the episode, do all men like their women unavailable and promiscuous? And I don't want to like kind of ruin the future of my podcast, but like we do see Mr. Big eventually kind of loses his mind about Carrie once she is unavailable. So what's your experience, especially in your work field? Do you think that there is, to an extent, maybe in early stages, it's worth to play that game and place yourself as this high value woman that like maybe needs to tie those hands, put those thumbs away, not call, not text, lean back and let them enjoy that chase?
I'm going to answer your question with a metaphor. Okay. So whenever I get this question from my clients in their dating lives, so when a client comes to me and they want to meet their match, they get that set up and they ask me about the communication, like how are they supposed to manage the connection? The question usually comes from women, by the way. And what I always mention is that they should think of it like salsa dancing. Okay. So in salsa dancing, we can think of the hunt and the chase is similar to the dynamic of leading and following the dance. Okay. So like leading and following in salsa. So in salsa, as you know, the man leads and guides the dance with like very clear cues. And then the woman follows. but she
Yeah.
follows in her own way with her own flair and with her own independence. Not every woman is going to respond to those leads and to those moves in the same way. So there's a balance in salsa. And like, while the leader,
I'm loving this analogy.
the man,
and why is it the first time that I'm hearing about this analogy in 15
well, we haven't
years?
started working together. So basically, like, there's this balance in salsa, right? Like, the leader is initiating, and then the follower, like usually the woman, is actually equally important, right? Because she's adding her own style and her own flair and contribution to this connection. My whole theory is like, just as in relationships, like the excitement of salsa comes from the interplay of that give and take, right? It's not about just one person pursuing or dominating. The magic is in the interplay. So like, if either partner is too focused on like controlling or playing hard to get, then the flow and connection of the dance is just disrupted. So
I get it.
I guess my answer to you is just like, it's not that simple, right? It's not that simple. And it's not just about like not responding to his text. It's about getting into the dance. And in salsa, like in relationships, like the authentic connection is what creates the best experience, right? So overcomplicating the chase detracts from the joy of the dance.
Okay.
Like, imagine if you're dancing salsa and the whole time you're like trying to do your own, you're like pulling back constantly and he's like trying to lead you.
I'm just doing ska moves. Yeah.
Right? Like, it just doesn't work.
I love this. So now I think I'm going to bring it back to the episode. At one point, Charlotte goes on this amazing date. Like, honestly, watching this show is always like, to be a Charlotte in this world. Upper East Side girl. She gets asked out by toxic bachelor number X. This Capote Duncan dude that is like tall, handsome, has a good flat, is very good looking, has a good job, takes her, I think, to the opera or to the ballet, can't tell. And then they are doing this little dance of, all right, they were kissing and he invites her over to his flat. And then Charlotte is like, oh, I have an early morning, i.e. going back to the handbook, playing hard to get. And then she sees that he completely like takes that back and is like, yeah, that's fine. And then Charlotte is like, you know what? Let me tease a bit more. Let me do another dance. And says, you know what? On second thought, I'd love to see that piece of art at your flat. And then they go back to this guy's place. They have this, I think he takes it as like a green light of, okay, it's happening. And then Charlotte is like, yeah, no, I have an early morning. And they kind of agree to have another date the next Saturday. And then he pulls this thing where he's like, actually, you're going uptown, aren't you? He jumps in the cab, gives another address to kind of get dropped off on the way. And Charlotte is like, wait a second, are you going to this club? It's like, yeah, completely understand what you're doing, but don't get me wrong, I need to get laid tonight. What do you think about this? Because obviously he's there giving a cue. Charlotte is like, what the hell? Short circuits around the whole thing. What do you think of that? Is it okay? Is it, or, well, obviously it depends on whoever. Do you think that maybe reading that cue and being like, oh, thank you for being honest, kind of gives a bad routine for the rest of your dancing lives?
Well, again, it depends on what your intention is. So like, if your intention is to date like a Samantha and just have fun, then maybe that openness is okay. Right? Maybe that's actually acceptable. But if you're more of a Charlotte looking for a long-term relationship, it probably is an immediate turnoff. And I think this is just around mutual respect and boundaries. So my biggest problem with this situation is that their values do not align. Okay. So if we go back to the salsa analogy, the cab ride in dating is like a dip or a spin in salsa. It's not the dip itself that's the issue. It's whether both partners feel comfortable and ready to take that dip. If one dancer isn't ready, like the dance loses its harmony, right? So like similarly in early dating, it's about finding the right rhythm together, like progressing naturally and like feeling like you're both being respected and in sync. And my opinion here is that like these are two people who are completely out of sync. He should be dating Samantha, right?
Which he ends up with at the end of the episode. And I love that. And I love that you say that, as I think, you know, there are values that are misaligned. But what if in an alternative universe, he was a smart man and he was like, I'm going to wait until she's gone to do this. Charlotte finds out, but kind of like 5 months in, when he's like, actually, I'm head over heels about you. So happy you took me upon that second date offer. But can you believe after that first night, I did this and I ended up back home with somebody else? Does that make it okay? And does that make the values aligned? What do you think? Because obviously, as you said, men are very different to women in dating and the way they approach sex. So how much room do you think is okay to make?
It's a spectrum. It's a spectrum. You need to decide what you're comfortable with on that spectrum. Having observed Charlotte and seen her through the episodes, I do not think that this man is on her spectrum. He's way off her spectrum, right? He's on planet Mars. He is not on the earth that Charlotte is on. So I do not think that this relationship is destined for success. I think that this relationship is destined for failure because his priorities are so different from hers. And not all men are like this. I think that's the other thing I want to mention. Like, you make it sound like all men are going to be like these, absolute like animals. And at the end of the day,
all right. You live in New York. I live in London. We know how it is to date in cities like this, where there's a big enabling factor of everything around the city for
but not all men
bachelors.
Are like this.
I agree. But
I promise you. Odds might be against us, but the majority of men, in my experience, do not exhibit this type of behavior. This, to me, is extreme behavior because he's so comfortable with his desires that he doesn't even read the room. Charlotte is like this prim and proper little girl from Upper East Side, like Park Avenue apartment with her pearls. Like, if he's telling her this, like, this guy is wild.
I think you're absolutely right. Okay, I love your take on this. Completely agree. Now, I'm going to do this one. I'm going to take one for the team of the listeners. Okay. So then again, I go to therapy, I date, I try. I date for a long-term partnership, not for Samantha purposes. So what are your thoughts on therapists always, and I'm not generalizing, maybe my therapist, I should say, sometimes says like, oh, you got to give it another shot. Like, how can you know so quick? Yeah. Obviously, in this case scenario, I think that's a red flag. If you see a red flag, and as they say, when somebody tells you who they are the first time, believe them. But what's your experience in getting two people to truly feel out whether or not they're compatible? Do you think that even if you're not head over heels in the first 3 dates, that's okay? Is it a 5-date thing? Does it depend on the date? What's your experience with how long it takes to kind of like navigate whether or not they're on both spectrums?
That's an interesting question, because the instinct that I've seen amongst my clients is that they want to give it one date. So after one date, if it doesn't go well, they're very quick to say, okay, no, on to the next one. Right. And I do think that has something to do with the availability of prospects that we have on these dating apps, because we always feel like, oh, there's so many other options, right? We're at the Cheesecake Factory. They have 100 cheesecakes. Like, why would I get that same cheesecake if I'm not sure I liked it? Right. If I have literally 99 others. I guess the question is like, how extreme is that dissonance? So if you did not click with someone right away, that's one thing. But if you were repelled by them, that's a completely different thing. So I think this is a spectrum. I think it depends how badly that first date went. And then based on that, then you can decide what to do on the next date. But I do not think that you should write off a man immediately on the first date without giving them another chance. I think it's important to give the process enough time. I always recommend the second date. As a matchmaker, that is my recommendation, because sometimes like nerves and awkwardness can get in the way of that first date. Some people are just slower to warm up. If we want to go back to the salsa thing, sometimes it takes a few tries when you're dancing to get in sync. And sometimes, it might take that second dance to really find your rhythm. Yeah. So I don't think you should wait till date 5. Like, let me just be abundantly clear. I just believe in taking the second date.
And I think that's a great point, and it comes very much in agreement with one of my dating biggest mottos, which is if you want to start thinking about a relationship with someone, the bare minimum is, are both people willing to make an effort to make ends meet? Because at one point, fine, you can say the client here is a woman. You can convince a woman easily to give a second chance, because I think we're softer hearted.
Yes.
But then obviously, when men do not want to do shit, I do think that the bare minimum is to know, like, you know what? Yeah, fine. Maybe that wasn't her best night. Everybody has an off day, but like, I was intrigued. I'm willing to give it another go. I'm willing to put in time.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's why I think rather than talking about 5 dates, with my experience, like when I'm speaking to my clients, it's just really important to tell them, give the guy a second chance or give the girl a second chance. So it's all about the second date. Past the second date, I really don't think you should have to force it. If the rhythm's not there on date 2, it's probably not going to be the right rhythm.
I think this is amazing news because at the end of the day, if there's anything that we don't have limitless of, it's time. So I think having 2 dates max kind of like makes things clearer faster. You can move on to the next prospect. Fantastic. Now I want to switch gears a little bit because I think we touched upon it a little bit. Part of this episode follows Carrie doing this little experiment that I think every woman has fantasized with. A man hurts you. He hurts you once. He hurts you twice. And then you kind of fantasize of like, oh, I'm going to run into him and I'm going to be next to this like beautiful man and he's going to suck it. And then I'm going to toy with him and I'm going to, make him suffer. When Carrie runs into this guy at this restaurant when she's with Stanford, her wish to kind of like go there and dangle a little carrot in front of him, completely get it. I think she's so brave to kind of like be like, you know what? I'm going to put my heart on the line again because it's been squashed 4 times. Let's try it a 5th time. And then she kind of does this thing, sex with no strings attached and has sex like a man, which I think it's, again, a very interesting experiment. It was very interesting to see her be so empowered about it. But then there's kind of like a U-turn when she runs into him at the club that they keep talking about in this episode. And he's like, I was so pissed off, but then I understood. You finally get the kind of relationship that I want. Amazing. Give me a call. If I'm single, I'm there for you. Turns around, kisses another woman, and then Carrie feels like all that power goes away. What do you think goes on there? How much of that do you think that is sometimes when we try to play games and maybe we adapt into a persona that is not 100% us?
Yes.
The shoe's not going to fit completely and you don't hold all the control. They might come back with something like this and it might hurt. So what do you think?
Exactly.
Number one, do you think that is like maybe compromising too much on the persona never goes well if you want to play games? And second of all, what do you think happens that she goes from feeling empowered to not feeling empowered?
This taps upon a very important issue when it comes to performance. Okay. So in our working world, we have been told that it's important to perform. Okay. You want to perform well. You get performance reviews. You want to perform like a top earner because there's someone, in the corridor wanting to take your job. I do not believe in performance when it comes to dating. I believe in authenticity and being yourself. So this touches upon a very important point, which is that Carrie is constantly performing. She has these feelings. She has these emotions. She has these instincts and intuitions that we have as women very, very deeply. But her choice is to ignore those intuitions, ignore all that, and then perform. So what ends up happening to her is sort of obvious in my mind, right? Because she's constantly performing instead of feeling the natural flow. And then it's unsustainable. So eventually you lose touch with your authentic self. And then I believe that the other person notices the lack of genuine connection. So I believe that we can only be actors for so long. We can only be performers for so long. You can go into your banking job or go into that, corporate office and perform for the day, but you couldn't keep that performance on 24/7 for months, right? So my whole theory is that real connection comes when both partners are honest and fully themselves. Playing these games can be sort of like being coy at the beginning is okay, but playing this level of games just creates a false rhythm. So how can you build something lasting on a shaky foundation?
Completely agree. Okay. And then the second part of my question, I think maybe has to do with how she gets hurt. Do you think that that's because she still has feelings for that guy and because she was just thinking about things according to her perspective and never kind of fantasized about him having somebody else, she's hurt? Or I guess it's also very similar to this, but like, do you think that it's about ego? Do you think that it's about her having sex and getting, again, that, what was it? What?
Oxytocin.
Oxytocin. I was going to call it Oxycontin. Oxytocin released again, that she's attached and then she sees that he's disattached. And like, do you think that it's hormonal? Do you think that it's her ego? What do you think that is about?
I think this is a nuanced question, right? Because we always have our ego involved when it comes to dating. Our ego is an important part of our persona, right? I think there's a lot of talk in the spiritual world about ego, like, oh, eliminate your ego. But like the ego is actually what protects us, right? So in my opinion, Carrie getting hurt could be a mix of factors, right? So it's a blend of like emotions that are tied to ego, rejection, but then it could also be her biological response. So I think she may have developed some early feelings, but it could also be about her fantasy of what could be. And I think that's the danger. That's where we have to be really careful about future thinking and looking forward. And it's super important in dating to be in the present. Be here and now. What is happening here and now? Don't be 3 steps ahead. Don't fantasize and create a story of what could be. Really be in the now. And I believe that a lot of Carrie's responses have to do with these feelings of inadequacy and feelings that she's not good enough. So what I see in Carrie is low self-worth. And when she plays these games, it's almost like a protection mechanism because she knows that she doesn't have that confidence. So she plays these games and puts on these facades to protect that little girl who doesn't feel worthy of love.
Vana hitting with the truth. Okay. I kind of want to get to the last bit of what I think will be my favorite part of these episodes. I'm going to ask you, if you were their dating coach or their best friend or their therapist, what would your advice be for each one of the girls for this episode? And just so that we're all on the same page, I'm going to give a recap of what each one of the 4 was up to. So we know Carrie was jumping around doing this experiment, trying to sleep with somebody that she was into, no strings attached, spitting big in the background. And she's trying to present this persona to him, but she, as you said, feels inadequate even presenting that to a virtual stranger. Samantha's doing what Samantha does best, which is, talking about sex like it is power, talking about how she's acting like a man. And for the first time ever, women in New York are having as much sex and as much power as men. Charlotte is, being very strict about how she dates, who she can date, and how they're supposed to act and how she's supposed to act. And poor Miranda, I feel like I've completely neglected her. But she's kind of this rampage where I think she feels so adequate about being such a feminist, so passionate about everything that's wrong with the patriarchy and men. And she kind of like takes or uses Skipper as a scapegoat and just takes everything out on the poor thing and is like, oh, do you think that I'm not pretty enough to be this smart? Or do you think that I'm not smart enough to be this pretty? What would be your dating coach / best friend advice to each one of them after watching this episode?
Okay. So I think we should start off with Carrie. She's the protagonist. So in my view, Carrie's pattern of keeping herself emotionally distant, as I mentioned, feels like a form of self-protection, but it's actually like limiting her ability to form these meaningful connections. So it's actually doing the opposite of what she wants to achieve. My advice to Carrie would be to lean into vulnerability. Being vulnerable doesn't mean that she's weak, right? It just means like showing up authentically and like allowing these guys to actually see the real her. It almost feels like Carrie's an air sign, right? She's like a Gemini or something. Like my advice would be like, if you're always halfway out the door, you'll miss out on the depth and like intimacy that like a real fulfilling relationship can offer. So like you shouldn't be 2 steps out the door every single time, Carrie. Be vulnerable. Allow yourself to show up authentically and let people see the real you. Please, you're cool. You're cute. You're fun. Like I'd rather see the real you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to see the real you. And you're not giving people a real opportunity to get to know you unless you show the full version of yourself.
Okay. Great advice. Who's next?
Okay. So Samantha's next. I love Samantha. Samantha sees sex as like a source of her empowerment. And I do believe there's truth to that. But in my view, true empowerment also comes from being in touch with your emotional needs. So there's an episode where Samantha gets sick and she has the flu and she's not able to get anyone to take care of her. And in that episode, when she's chugging NyQuil, we actually see her emotional needs. But I never really understand what Samantha's emotional needs are. So my advice to Samantha would be to like, just recognize that seeking love, intimacy, or emotional connection does not make you weak. It makes you human. So like balancing that emotional vulnerability with physical empowerment would give her this well-roundedness and a true sense of power. Because in her pursuit of purely physical relationships, I believe she gives away her power.
Another great piece of advice. All right, what would
now,
you tell?
Charlotte?
Yes.
Okay. So I have this sort of affinity towards Charlotte because I see a lot of my patterns in her. So she's probably the most difficult one for me to analyze, but I would say that the rigidness of Charlotte's dating rules sometimes protect her from getting hurt, but they also keep her closed to so many different potential relationships. So my advice to Charlotte is flexibility. You know, Charlotte's like a Virgo or something. She's like so organized and controlling and meticulous, but it's really important to be flexible in dating because like, yes, it's great to have high standards, but being so strict can limit your opportunities for connection, right? It's like traveling to Spain when you're on a low carb diet and not wanting to try any of the tapas. It's like, this is ridiculous. Like you're only in Spain for 5 days. Can you just eat the tapas and chill? So I believe that the most meaningful experiences sometimes come from stepping outside of your comfort zone, right? And softening your approach to love. So that would be my advice to Charlotte. It's just like, let off on the rules.
But without compromising on who she truly is.
Exactly. Keep your standards high, but start to be a little bit more flexible.
What about Miranda then?
Oh, Miranda. Miranda. So I always admire that feminist approach that Miranda has. But I do think it's a really fine line because sometimes I feel that she doesn't treat people nicely and there's something unkind about Miranda. So I think my advice to her would be to remember that strength and kindness aren't mutually exclusive. Like you can be strong and you can also be kind, Miranda. So you can strongly and firmly like state your values and explain what you stand for and defend your feminist beliefs, but you can still be respectful and considerate to others, right? So I just believe that Samantha could be open to other perspectives and then she will actually deepen her relationships long-term if she does that.
Okay. And in this instance, do you think that maybe Miranda could have explored things with Skipper knowing that that's not the guy for her, as long as she expressed things clearly? Like, what do you think is that approach where I think everybody except Skipper knows that they're not meant to be, but she still goes there with him?
Yeah. I think that communication is really important. So setting the expectations would have changed everything, right? And just communicating what you want and communicating what you're looking for, that can be the key to happiness because then everyone knows where they stand, right? I think the hardest thing when it comes to dating and like both in this case with Miranda and Skipper, but just in general, when I see this with my clients is like so much of our confusion and our stress and anxiety comes from not knowing where we stand. So once you know where you stand, everything gets a lot easier.
I think that's it. Yeah. Thank you so much, Vana.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I love this format. I love the Sex and the City style. And I just think it's such a beautiful way to showcase how nuanced and different relationships can be. Right. And there's like vulnerability and self-protection and power and emotional needs and rules and hormones. And like, there's just so much going on. And I love that your podcast is helping people build those deeper and more fulfilling connections.
I mean, wait until we get into the and just like that part of this. So hopefully we'll cover all 6 seasons and then go into that and then explore sexuality in all its spectrum. But thank you so much, Vana. This has all been great advice, super informative. Anything that you want to plug in here for our listeners on where they can find you, if they want to pursue your services? If they want to sign up
for my beautiful dating matchmaking services, they can find me at vanachristina.com with no H. So VANACRISTINA, but you can just include that in the show notes.
I will include that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Vana. We'll see you again here soon, I'm sure. And
thank you so much.
Have a great day.
Amazing. Thank you.